They gave me the worst room on the family trip. They didn't know I owned the hotel. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm in my mid-30s, and for most of my life, I've kept to myself. I don't brag, I don't boast, and I don't need anyone to know how well I've done. Quiet suits me. What my family doesn't know is that I've worked hard, built my own success from scratch, and own more than they'd ever imagine. But to them, I'm still the lesser sibling. The trip was organized by my older sister Melissa. She's the one everyone in my family looks up to. Married, kids, big house in the suburbs. She likes to remind me of it all. Every holiday, every dinner, she manages to slip in a jab about me being single, about me not being as accomplished. My mom, Linda, laps it up. My brother, Ethan, throws in his own jokes. Dad just sits there, pretending not to hear. That's the way it's always been. So when Melissa decided we should all take a family trip, I knew what I was walking into. I came anyway, mostly to keep the peace, but also to prove to myself that I could handle it. I kept my head down, packed my bags, and flew out to meet them at the hotel. When we arrived, Melissa had already taken charge of the room assignments. Everyone got suites. Big beds, nice views, plenty of space. Then it was my turn. "Rachel, you don't mind the small one, right?" she said with that smile that never reached her eyes. She handed me the key like she was doing me a favor. I should have known better. The room I opened the door to barely passed as livable. The carpet was worn thin, the wallpaper peeling, and the bed looked like it belonged in a cheap roadside inn. The air conditioner rattled like it was on its last breath, and the smell of mildew hit me the moment I stepped inside. I stood there for a moment, holding my suitcase, listening to the laughter coming from the hall. They thought it was funny. My family, my own blood, thought it was a joke to stick me in the worst space while they enjoyed comfort and luxury. I sat down on the bed, the springs groaning under me, and let the truth settle in. This wasn't about space. This was about power. They wanted to remind me, yet again, that I was the outsider, that I didn't belong on their level. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even begin to imagine, was that this entire hotel was mine. I signed the papers. I paid the staff. I owned every key card, every wall, every room, including the ones they thought were there. And I decided right then and there, they were going to find out. At breakfast the next morning, I slid into a chair at the far end of the table. My mom, Linda, barely glanced at me before turning back to Melissa, who was holding court like always. "You really outdid yourself organizing this trip," Mom said warmly, her hand brushing Melissa's arm. "Not everyone has your talent." Her eyes flicked toward me for half a second, then away, like I wasn't even part of the conversation. Melissa grinned, soaking up the praise. "Well, planning is second nature when you've got kids and a husband to look after. You learn to juggle a lot." She didn't look at me directly, but her words carried a sharp edge, as if to remind me she had what I didn't. Charles, my dad, sat beside Mom, sipping his coffee slowly. He wore the same expression he always did when things leaned toward uncomfortable, quiet, detached, like a referee who refused to blow the whistle. When Melissa nudged me about how some people wouldn't understand the pressure of keeping a family together, I caught Dad watching me from the corner of his eye. But as usual, he said nothing. He never did. Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking as he stirred his orange juice with a straw. "Don't be too hard on Rachel," he chimed in. "She's probably still busy figuring out how to keep a plan alive, let alone a family." The table erupted with laughter. Mom's high-pitched chuckle, Melissa's polished giggle, even Dad shaking his head like it was harmless fun. I kept my face still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Melissa tilted her head, her tone sugary, but her eyes sharp. "You'll get there eventually, Ratch." "Maybe." Her diamond ring caught the light as she tucked her hair behind her ear, as though she'd timed the gesture for maximum effect. She went on about her new kitchen remodel, about how her kids were excelling at school, about how her husband had just been promoted. Every sentence seemed crafted to paint her life as the perfect portrait, while mine was left in dull shadows. I listened in silence, nodding occasionally, my smile faint and practiced. They thought I was used to it, that I had accepted my role as the background character in their story. The truth was, I had learned long ago not to fight their version of me. Let them believe I was fragile, unremarkable, unworthy of the attention they showered on Melissa. Mom reached across the table to adjust Melissa's napkin, her voice soft with affection. "You're such a blessing to this family." The words stung, though I kept my face calm. A daughter worthy of pride, a son who could joke at my expense, a father who stayed silent. That was the family picture. I lowered my eyes to the plate in front of me, pushing the eggs around with my fork. They didn't need to know who I really was or what I had built. Not yet. Keeping quiet had always been my way, and for now, it suited me to stay in their blind spot. When the time came to collect our keys, Melissa stood at the front desk, smiling as if she were the hostess of the whole event. She passed out envelopes one by one, announcing each name like she was assigning seats at a gala. Ethan got a spacious suite with a balcony. Our parents received a corner room with plush chairs and a view of the pool, and Melissa, of course, claimed the penthouse with her husband and kids. When she finally reached me, she hesitated for half a second, then placed a small envelope in my hand. "Hope you don't mind, Rachel. This one was all that was left," she said sweetly. I unlocked the door and stepped into what looked like a forgotten storage closet. The bed sagged in the middle like a hammock, the sheets rough against my fingers. A loud clunk echoed from the ancient air conditioner as it sputtered weakly, blowing more dust than cool air. The wallpaper curled at the seams, stained in places where water must have leaked. A sour odor clung to the room, heavy and damp, as though no one had opened the window in years. Laughter spilled from the hallway behind me. I didn't need to see their faces to know they were amused. Melissa's voice carried, light and mocking. "Oh, it's just for a few nights, she'll survive." Ethan added something about me being used to roughing it, and their chuckles rose again. I closed the door before the sound could follow me inside. I set my suitcase on the wobbly dresser and sat on the edge of the mattress, which groaned under my weight. My chest tightened, not because of the stale air, but because of the sharp sting that came with realizing just how little they thought of me. This was supposed to be about togetherness, a rare chance to reconnect. Instead, it felt like a performance, and I had been cast as the butt of every joke. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the steady drip from a pipe hidden behind the wall. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it didn't matter, that I had endured worse. Yet the sense of betrayal pressed heavier than the heat in the air. I had come here hoping, foolishly, that things might be different, that Melissa might finally treat me like more than an afterthought. I ran my hand over the chipped nightstand, feeling the rough grooves under my palm. It wasn't the cramped space or the broken fixtures that cut me deepest. It was knowing that the people who should have wanted me comfortable had chosen instead to humiliate me. Every peeling corner of wallpaper, every rattling gust from the vent, felt like a deliberate reminder of where they believed I belonged. I straightened slowly, forcing my shoulders back. If they thought this would keep me small, they didn't know me at all. There was a time when I couldn't imagine leaving the constant noise of my family, but the day I finally walked out, I never looked back. Years of biting remarks and endless comparisons had drained me, and one morning I realized I owed them nothing. With nothing more than a suitcase and a few $100s, I left their world behind and decided to build my own. I found my first job working the front desk at a small inn off the highway. The shifts were long and the pay barely covered rent, but I paid attention. I learned how to handle demanding guests, how to calm tempers, how to make people feel welcome. Over time, I understood what made a place thrive wasn't just clean sheets and hot meals. It was the care and how people were treated. From that desk, I climbed upward. I took on management roles, studied how properties were financed, and saved every penny I could. While my family was busy mocking me, I was building something solid piece by piece. I lived simply, investing instead of spending, watching opportunities with a careful eye. I learned to recognize value where others saw decline, and that skill became my secret weapon. When this hotel went up for sale, most saw it as a lost cause. The walls were tired, the business barely breaking even. I saw potential. Through a quiet company I had formed, I signed the papers and became its owner. My name never appeared on the surface. The staff knew me only as the quiet figure who visited often, offering guidance and resources, always choosing to remain in the background. The improvements came slowly but steadily, and soon the place turned profitable again. I returned regularly, walking the halls like any other guest, blending in while checking every detail. I knew which floors needed upgrades, which employees deserved promotion, which corners still carried the weight of the past. To everyone else, it was just another property. To me, it was proof that stepping away from the shadows of my family had been the right choice. So when Melissa announced this grand family getaway, I agreed, not because I longed for their approval, but because some part of me hoped for peace. Perhaps sitting under the same roof without judgment might feel different after all these years. I thought I could handle it, that I could overlook their habits for the sake of togetherness. But standing in that shabby room with peeling edges and stale air, I realized I had been foolish. The old wounds had never healed. They had only been waiting for the chance to reopen. They thought they had tucked me into the corner, hidden away like a discarded suitcase. They had no idea the very ground beneath their feet, the walls surrounding them, the roof over their heads, it all belonged to me. And now, their insult had gone too far. Dinner was set in the main dining room, long tables dressed in crisp white linen, the clink of silverware echoing under the low hum of conversation. My family had gathered early, their laughter already filling the space by the time I arrived. I slipped into a seat near the end, smoothing the fabric of my dress across my lap, aware of how quickly the eyes around me measured and dismissed. Melissa launched into a story before I had even opened my menu. Her voice carried across the table, polished and loud enough for nearby guests to catch every word. She spoke about the new SUV her husband had surprised her with, how the leather smelled brand new, how the kids loved the built-in screen. Each sentence dripped with satisfaction, her smile lingering as though she were performing. Ethan leaned back, his gaze sliding toward me. "Rachel," he said suddenly, his tone light but edged. "That dress looks vintage, like actually vintage. Did you dig it out of a thrift store?" The chuckle that followed spread quickly. Melissa hid her mouth behind her glass, shoulders shaking, while Mom pursed her lips, pretending to scold but enjoying the scene. "Now, Ethan," she said, shaking her head, "don't tease. Rachel will find her footing one day. Maybe once she finally settles down." Her eyes turned to me with that familiar blend of pity and judgment. "You're not getting any younger, honey. Don't you ever think about building a family of your own?" The words dropped like stones into the silence that followed. My fork hovered over my plate, unmoving. I swallowed back the sharp reply forming in my throat, forcing myself into stillness. I had learned long ago that silence was easier than protest. It saved energy, it avoided explosion. But as I lowered my gaze, I caught sight of the servers hovering at the edge of the room. Their eyes shifted between the table and me, faces tight with unease. They had always treated me with quiet respect, but now I could see the discomfort in the way they lingered, how they winced when laughter broke at my expense. They knew more than my family ever suspected, and it was clear they hated witnessing the way I was being treated. Something inside me hardened. The weight of their stares, the echo of Melissa's voice, the smirk on Ethan's face, Mom's careless nudge toward marriage, all of it pressed down like a tide, and I realized I was done letting them shape me into their favorite target. I lifted my glass, holding it steady in my hand. My smile was faint, but behind it, a decision had formed with the clarity of steel. If they wanted to keep me small, hidden, a joke at every gathering, they were about to see just how wrong they were. It was time they learned the truth. After the plates were cleared and the table emptied, I excused myself quietly and left the dining room. The hallway stretched long and hushed, a stark contrast to the chatter I had just endured. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I moved toward a door most guests never noticed, a door that led behind the scene. I knocked once before stepping inside. Mr. Harris was there, reviewing paperwork at his desk, glasses perched low on his nose. When he looked up and saw me, his expression shifted instantly, professional courtesy melting into the warm respect he always reserved for me. He rose from his chair. "Ms. Carter," he said, voice low but sincere. "I take it the evening hasn't been easy." I closed the door behind me and exhaled, tension slipping from my shoulders. "You could say that." I took a seat across from him, the air heavy with the faint scent of coffee and old leather. "They've crossed a line, and I think it's time I stop letting them." He nodded slowly, as though he had been expecting this moment. For years, Harris had overseen daily operations, managing staff with care, ensuring the building reflected the standards I demanded. He had always understood my choice to remain invisible, to keep my role concealed. Now his eyes searched mine, waiting for the next step. "Play along for one more night," I told him, keeping my tone steady. "Don't change anything. Tomorrow, I'll take care of the rest." He leaned back slightly, folding his hands together. "As you wish. The staff will follow your lead, as always." There was no doubt in his voice, only loyalty. Leaving his office, I walked the quiet service corridors, past the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the faint hum of laundry machines spinning in the background. I thought about the years I had poured into building this place, the pride I felt every time a guest left smiling, the way my employees had grown into a family of their own. They respected me because I had earned it, not because I demanded it. The contrast cut deep. At home, respect had always been conditional, measured against Melissa's accomplishments or Ethan's jokes. Here, it came naturally, without games or comparisons. That difference was why I had kept my ownership a secret for so long. But tonight had changed everything. As I returned to my room, the plan took shape in my mind, not a scheme of vengeance, but a statement of truth. I didn't want to embarrass them just for satisfaction. What I needed was to shift the balance, to make them see me as I truly was, not the fragile figure they enjoyed tearing down. I sat on the edge of the crooked bed, staring at the wall with peeling paint. Tomorrow, the roles would reverse. Tomorrow, they would walk through these halls with new eyes. Tomorrow, I would no longer be invisible. Morning light spilled through the lobby windows, catching on polished marble floors and casting long streaks of gold across the front desk. Guests milled about quietly, collecting keys and checking schedules, but one voice carried over all the others. Melissa's. She stood near the counter, her arms crossed, her words sharp enough to make the receptionist's hands tremble. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "My suite should have better linens, and the view isn't nearly what I was promised." For the money we're spending, I expect something better. Her tone climbed louder with each sentence, ensuring every passerby caught the performance. The young woman behind the desk stammered an apology, cheeks flushed, her polite smile strained at the edges. Melissa didn't pause. I want an upgrade. My husband deserves something finer. My children can't possibly enjoy themselves with such a disappointment. She tapped her manicured nails against the counter, each strike impatient and deliberate. I lingered a few steps away, watching as the staff tried to soothe her, their postures stiff with discomfort. The manager, Harris, had already caught my eye from across the lobby, his face tight but composed, waiting for my signal. Still, I held back, letting the scene unfold a little longer. Ethan leaned against a column nearby, smirking as though the chaos amused him. Our parents stood to the side, saying nothing, letting Melissa dominate the space as she always did. The other guests avoided looking directly, though I could feel their awareness prickling the air. Finally, Melissa slammed her hand down flat on the counter. If this is the level of service, I want to speak to whoever runs this establishment. Clearly no one here knows what they're doing. The receptionist faltered, her mouth opening without words. That was when I stepped forward. Enough, I said, my voice steady but firm, cutting through the noise. Let's talk about who really runs this place. The shift was immediate. Heads turned, eyes snapped to me. Melissa blinked, caught off guard for half a second before her lips curled into a laugh. Ethan joined in, a low chuckle escaping as if I had delivered a punchline. Even Mom raised her brows, amusement flickering in her expression. Oh, Rachel, Melissa said between giggles. Don't tell me you're suddenly in charge of hotels now. Ethan shook his head, grinning. She's kidding. Come on, look at her. She wouldn't last an hour behind that desk. Their laughter echoed through the lobby, bouncing off the high ceilings, ringing in my ears. Staff exchanged uneasy glances, caught between their duty to remain silent and the knowledge of the truth. Harris straightened, his jaw set, but he waited, knowing this moment belonged to me. I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I simply stood there, meeting each of their eyes in turn, calm as stone. Let them think it was a joke, for now. I didn't answer their laughter with another word. Instead, I turned toward Harris and gave him a small nod. He understood instantly, moving closer with a measured calm that contrasted sharply against Melissa's noise. If you'll follow us, he said, gesturing toward the hallway that led behind the lobby. My family exchanged puzzled glances but trailed after me, curiosity pulling them along. We walked past doors marked staff only, the carpet giving way to polished wood, the lighting dimmer here, quieter. I stopped in front of a wide door with brass handles, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of leather and paper, the walls lined with framed photographs of the hotel through its history. At the center stood a grand desk, solid oak, the chair behind it commanding the space. I crossed the room, every step deliberate, and lowered myself into that chair. My hands rested easily on the arms, my back straight as I looked at the faces staring back at me. You've been asking to see who runs this place, I said evenly. You're looking at her. I am the sole owner of this hotel. For a moment, silence hung heavy. No sound but the faint tick of the clock on the wall. Ethan's mouth twitched like he was about to laugh again, but the amusement never fully came. Melissa blinked rapidly, her lips parting in disbelief. Mom's brow furrowed, as if she couldn't quite process the words. Finally, Melissa let out a short laugh, sharp and brittle. Oh, Rachel, that's cute. You've really committed to the act. She turned to Harris, expecting agreement. Tell her she's being ridiculous. But Harris didn't flinch. He addressed me with steady respect. Yes, Ms. Carter. Everything is as you instructed. The staff is ready whenever you are. His words carried weight, every syllable confirming the truth none of them wanted to hear. Melissa's laugh faltered, thinning into silence. Ethan's smirk dropped as he glanced between Harris and me. Mom looked pale, her hand clutching her necklace. Dad finally shifted, as if the neutrality he always hid behind had cracked in two. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but firm. This isn't a joke. I own the walls you slept under, the floors you walked across, every key card in your pockets. You spent last night in my property. No one spoke. The awkward stillness pressed down like a weight. The earlier laughter that had bounced so freely in the lobby was gone, replaced by the quiet recognition of truth. Melissa tried one more time, her words stumbling. Well, even if you do have some stake in this place, that doesn't change. She cut herself off when the receptionist knocked softly and entered, her eyes lowered respectfully as she addressed me. Ms. Carter, shall I bring the documents you requested? The respect in her tone was undeniable. Every eye in the room shifted back to me, and for the first time in years, I saw no mockery in their gaze, only shock. I rose from the chair and crossed to the door, gesturing for Harris to follow. My family trailed behind, still silent, still processing. We returned to the lobby, where the desk staff straightened at once when they saw me approach. I stopped at the counter, my voice steady and clear. Reassign the rooms, I instructed. Move my belongings into the presidential suite. As for the others, place them in the smallest available accommodations. Pens froze midair. The receptionist glanced at Harris, who gave a single nod. Orders were entered, key cards reprinted. I turned back to the people who had spent their lives cutting me down. You've treated me like I'm nothing, I said, each word measured. Not anymore. Melissa's face flushed red. You can't be serious. You're actually putting us in those closets? After everything I've done to plan this trip? Her voice cracked with disbelief, fury rising like steam. She reached for the new cards, then tossed them back on the counter with a clatter. This is insane. Mom stepped forward, hands trembling as she tried to soften the moment. Rachel, sweetheart, you don't mean this. We only wanted. Her sentence broke apart, excuses collapsing before they could form. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, eyes darting between me and the staff who waited quietly, ready to follow my lead. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his usual grin nowhere to be found. He scratched the back of his neck, muttering under his breath. Guess we pushed too far, he admitted, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. For once, there was no joke, no easy escape for him. Keys clinked as the receptionist set them neatly on the counter. I took mine first, the one for the top floor, the suite reserved for the highest guests. My family's cards sat untouched beside it, smaller envelopes with numbers they clearly didn't want. The silence stretched, broken only by Melissa's ragged breathing. I didn't waver. My voice remained calm, but the firmness in it left no room for argument. This isn't about comfort. It's about respect. You've mocked me, dismissed me, treated me like I didn't matter. That ends here. Melissa's eyes filled with hot tears, her anger spilling out in a harsh sob. She turned on her heel, muttering something bitter as she stormed toward the elevator. Mom stayed frozen in place, her mouth opening and closing, as though searching for words that never came. Dad lingered behind them, shoulders heavy, saying nothing at all. Ethan was the last to move, dragging his suitcase reluctantly. He shot me one look over his shoulder, something close to shame flickering across his face before he disappeared down the hall. I picked up my own key, the weight of it solid in my palm. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking under their judgment. I stood where I belonged, every eye in the lobby recognized. Power didn't feel like vengeance, it felt like finally being seen. The days that followed unfolded differently than any of us expected. My family remained in the cramped quarters assigned to them, their complaints subdued, their laughter muted. Meals were eaten with careful words, the sharp edges of their usual remarks blunted into silence. I allowed them to stay, not because I wanted their company, but because sending them away would have been too simple. They needed to sit in those walls, to feel what it meant to be given less, to taste the discomfort they had so freely offered. I set the tone from that moment on. Every gathering, every conversation, operated under rules I established. No more barbs disguised as humor, no more condescending comments disguised as concern. If someone slipped, I ended it with a look, and they swallowed their words before they could land. The staff carried out my directions with seamless precision, their deference to me making it clear who held the authority. For once, my family had no choice but to recognize. I found myself walking through the hotel with new eyes, not as a hidden observer, but as someone fully claiming her place. I checked in with employees, spoke with guests, adjusted details I had long noticed but never addressed in front of them. Each action reminded me of how far I had come since leaving behind the noise of comparison and dismissal. This wasn't about punishing them, it was about standing tall in what I had built. When the trip neared its end, the shift in their behavior was undeniable. Melissa's voice, once so sharp, had softened into short answers. Mom no longer carried that air of superiority, her eyes downcast more often than not. Ethan kept his remarks to himself, his usual smirk nowhere to be found. Even Dad, usually silent, seemed weighed down by something unspoken. They packed their bags quietly, no fanfare, no laughter echoing down the hall. At checkout, their goodbyes were brief, awkward hugs and murmured words. Melissa avoided my gaze. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. Ethan muttered something about catching his flight. None of them dared mention the rooms they had endured, or the truth they had been forced to face. They left smaller than they had arrived, and the emptiness in their wake felt lighter than I ever expected. When the lobby doors closed behind them, I remained. I walked the corridors slowly, listening to the hum of the elevators, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, the low murmur of guests at ease. Every detail spoke of the years of effort, the countless hours, the risks I had taken. This place was mine, not because I had inherited it, not because anyone had handed it to me, but because I had carved it out with my own hands. I paused at the top of the grand staircase, looking down over the space I commanded, pride settling deep in my chest. Sometimes the worst room leads you to the best revenge. Do you think I was right to let them stay under my rules, or should I have offered another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories.